Okay, well, we're doing a little interview here about our experiences in juvenile court. I'm Rob Dawalt. This is Ron Henderson. Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
My background is from a legal perspective. I've practiced law for nearly 20 years. Still maintain my license even though I'm moved full-time into the academic world. Probably the most pertinent for today is that in the early 2000s I became an appointed judge in Delaware County, Indiana. In Indiana, we're referred to 4 or 5 different terms: master, commissioner, magistrate, referee. All of those terms apply. And one of the responsibilities that I enjoyed during that time was that I was juvenile court judge in Delaware County.
Yeah, my situation was that I was in Grant County, but I started out in actually Stark County, Ohio in juvenile probation, and then I shifted to back home again in Indiana, and I became the what we call the juvenile referee up there in Marion. So basically, the background that I had, I came from a small town and was going to law school, needed a job, found this job as a probation officer, and more or less the rest is history. But you're just kind of moving through the different aspects of juvenile court. It was an important job. At times, it was almost like being God in some ways. I mean, you affected lives so much, at a lot of times too, at a real early stage in people's lives.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, how did you feel about that in terms of day-to-day type of operation?
Well, and I think that's absolutely correct, and that's one of the difficult things with the practice of law, and especially if you transition into a judicial position. One of the most daunting things is the realization that you're affecting people's lives with every decision you make, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
Their lives are being changed, and you have that key, so to speak. And that is done especially with young people and children, as many of them are that go through juvenile court proceedings. Some of them are minors. We wouldn't necessarily consider them children, but many of them are children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you really play a role in defining, their life path to some extent. And that if you don't take that seriously, and if it doesn't mean anything to you, then you ought not be in that position.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that you should take the role seriously and do your best, but I always had the view that at the end of the day, I just left it and went on, Now, like I was saying earlier, there's a few things that have kind of haunted me that I often question myself about whether or not I made the right choice, whether I made the right decision. But overall, I mean, it was extremely enjoyable, quite a learning experience for me. I feel like it has a big part to do with the work I do now as a college professor. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really good that in our program, that we are both in our program, because we can bring some real life experience to bear.
Yeah. I was relatively young. When I was on the bench in juvenile court, and I think that assisted, that helped in relating to the younger folks that I would see. So many times I think jurisdictions have judicial officers in courts like that, and there is no real connection. Be it generational differences, age, whatever it might be. But I think that helped me. But one thing that I realized early on was that with young people, you can have positive impact. You don't always.
Well, that's
but the
true.
Possibility is there.
I think about 80% of my kids actually turned out pretty good. Actually, I mean, I think that's probably a low number even. But I mean,
and I hope you're right. And I hope my numbers are that high as well. And unfortunately, it's just like with teaching. Sometimes you never get the benefit of seeing not the finished
product or whatever. Yeah, I think on mine, a lot of it really had nothing to do with what we did as much as it's just age and experience, mm-hmm. and the kid would just like grow out of a stage that they were in, where they were in kind kind of a delinquent stage or pre-delinquent stage.
Being influenced, by folks that probably ought not be influenced.
Yeah.
Not being given the parental guidance maybe that was necessary, and sometimes it's just self-actualization.
Yeah.
Hasn't taken place.
Well, that's it. Yeah, there's just not been enough growth and thought on the child's part.
Right.
I always like this story, and I don't know how you feel about it, but you probably had the same thing happen. But I used to have cases where the mother would always come. It'd be the mother, the grandma, a lot of times the preacher, maybe half the congregation would come to juvenile court and want to support Johnny, Right. But they'd bring him. Johnny's a good boy. If I could just keep him away from his neighbor Anthony,
Right.
So we'd walk all through this, and it's the peer pressure. For you just didn't have this peer pressure, So Johnny leaves. I put him on probation. They leave. Well, next case. What's the next case? Well, here we have Anthony. So here comes Anthony. Anthony's mother. Anthony's a good boy. If I could just keep him away from Johnny,
Right.
It's an age-old story. I think both of them are good boys, but there's a bad dynamic that springs out of that relationship.
And each of them support system wants to
exactly.
play the blame game on the other.
And I think when you take it to the worst possible outcome, you look at the Columbine shootings and some of the things that were going on, and there was one that was kind of a follower and one that was kind of a leader, but both in kind of a really warped, weird way, And so I think I saw that on a lower, lesser scale where a lot of those kids finally got it together and made it out of that. But that's the worst case scenario, is when they actually act out on some of their weird ideation and stuff. And but then the flip side, like I said, is the vast majority of kids, they don't do that. They straighten up.
With young people, it's not unlike any other social dynamic of any other age group. There are those who seemingly possess greater social power than others, and sometimes they'll use that social power for not such good ends.
And there's extreme examples out there that we can see like every day,
Right.
But probably the vast majority of my people that I saw that were like chronic in trouble were marginally intellectual. In other words, 60, 70 degree or percent in their IQ test, that range, And so they were just struggling, to get by as far as adapting to their environment around them. And invariably, they just couldn't play by the rules because I don't think they could keep the rules straight,
Well, and education in those cases can only account for so much growth and progress. And that makes us all feel, somewhat impotent in being able to help them.
Right. Because there really is no good answer. The flip side of that, though, that to me, that's sad. It's sad when you have people that just don't have the whatever we want to call God-given ability to be, a productive citizen. But the other side of it, sometimes I don't know which frustrated me the most, but the flip side is these guys that are like almost on genius level that get into I had a guy that was working this scam where he was looking people up in the obituaries, and then he would go to the library and he would use this special phone book, and he would cross-reference their phone number and get their address.
Right.
And then he would go and he would burglarize their house while they're at their mother's funeral.
Sure.
Take off their television, come up in a big old van and just haul everything away.
And I think that's one of the age-old things with, criminals of any age.
Yeah.
If some of them, if they were as industrious, with better intentions.
Sure, good things.
They'd be outstanding.
Absolutely. They wouldn't have to worry. But they somehow get turned to the dark side.
If they would give half the effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing well and doing, things.
But for some reason that challenges them. That kid did like 20 burglaries before finally little old guy that lived next door, nosy neighbor type thing, comes over there and says, well, what are you doing here? Well, I'm helping move some stuff in. They've got some new stuff and they're getting rid of some of their old stuff. And they're like, well, no, they're going to a funeral. I don't think they'd even be worried about that today, So finally he goes and calls 911 and they catch this kid. And here come to find out this kid's been doing burglaries all over the county, but they couldn't figure out the common denominator. And here it was the obituary. So,
Sure.
But here again, you get them from the far ends intellectually really challenged, all the way up to, like you said, could go to Harvard or something, if they wanted to, but are, just somehow looking at things that they think are extremely interesting or cool, or I want to do that.
Or they see it as a shortcut.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
That's all they've seen from their social directors. Their parents, relatives, whomever it might be.
Now, another thing I saw a lot would be, let's say the football team, they won the championship, so they go out and knock out like 40 mailboxes.
Sure.
Or the football team, they lose the whole season, so they're real mad, so they go out and knock out 50 mailboxes, and it's so that can just be kind of an impulsive, stupid. Probably the kids would be law-abiding citizens before and after, but just that one time they had to let off a little steam and they did something really destructive.
And that's part of the beauty of the rehabilitative aspect of juvenile court. You can take situations like that and not necessarily place a lifelong attachment to a child.
For like a mark on his record forever.
It doesn't necessarily need to follow if they are going to, transcend that and not ever go back and engage in that. And if it was a one-time impulsive.
And it's a funny thing because they didn't even have these words back when I was witnessing that, but this restorative justice that you see now. And it's funny where I start getting these criminological theories and start applying them to these cases that I had. But I mean, this restorative justice is so apt for this case with the mailboxes, because I made all the kids pay for and install a new mailbox for all these farmers.
For the victims.
Yeah, the victims, So the dads, they lended a hand, but the dad wasn't allowed to do it all, But the dads were all farmers too, so they had the equipment and the know-how, and so they got out there and made it a group project for the whole football
Brought the community a little
bit
more together.
And then it's so funny because the probation officer came back and was talking to me about it, and he said, I went out there just to see how it was going. He said, these grandmas are coming out of these farmhouses with cookies, lemonade, and it's just like a family party, and everybody knows everybody, and I'm real sorry, Mrs. Jones, and I'm fixing your mailbox. Oh, let me get you some cookies, So it turned out, really restorative in the whole community, and the respect for each other and the caring for each other.
And that was one of your decisions that you thought, this was the right
I did something good for a change, What did I do, But it worked out really, really good, and it made you, really proud of the system, like you say, and stuff. So
because that's what I found out. Most of the time it wasn't anything magic that, I was able to come up with. More than often than not, it was, a lot of folks' hard work and sometimes just good luck.
What I found, when you never knew what you're getting into on a daily basis. It could be pure tragedy, like the death of a baby or something, all the way up to something really kind of comical, like Dumb, where a kid was trying to steal something and broke in somewhere, got himself locked in the freezer or something like that, and somebody had to come and get him, so he's having to call somebody or something, So it was a whole range of crazy emotions that we went through. But like I say, I was relatively young during that time, about 30 when I was doing that, and well, let's face it takes for like ever to get through law school. So you're pretty old actually when you get started on this stuff. But it was a really worthwhile thing, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's the one part of the practice, the day-to-day practice of law that I truly miss.
Yeah, I often sometimes wish that I had just never walked away from that and just stayed with it and did it,
I agree.
Well, hey, that's probably going to be it. Thanks for your help.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. We'll share this then with the students, and hopefully it'll be beneficial. Thanks for watching. Yeah, keep